Welcome to the Pixelated Perfect podcast. Hey, Anthony. Thanks so much for joining us. So I am really excited to have you on board. And for everyone listening, this is the Pixelated Perfect podcast, where we are diving deep and learning more about designers' career paths, what they did, how they got started, and how they are currently in the product design, UI, UX design world. So super excited to have you on board. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Yeah, thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So what I want to do is I would love to kind of get an overview of how you got started in design, all the way up to what are you doing now? And for everyone to know, I know you just mentioned it, Anthony, is you recently got a job at Amazon Music.
Yeah, this is week one.
Week one, congratulations. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm super excited to hear how you started and how you've gotten to this awesome, huge company doing really amazing things in the design world.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you like the super high level since like college graduation, because it's a little important. Graduated with a master's in like financial economics and math. That's what I thought I wanted to do with my life, or, like what would give me the most opportunity. So I went to a law firm to help from like an antitrust perspective and come up with various like documents that would explain these various markets, and wasn't a fan of doing it. Went to a financial place, wasn't a fan of doing it there either. And when that ended, I was like, what am I going to do? And I've always wanted to make games. I've always wanted to design those things. So I told myself, all right, I'm just going to do that. So I ended up making games through my own company. I founded my own company. I made a board game company, and that's where I really got started in design. Because I had to create an experience for someone, and I did a lot of what you do for design thinking process, and including like a ton of usability testing to make sure that game was fun. And I ended up starting my own company and doing that. So that was like the start. And then from there, I just translated that into other opportunities. While I was doing that, I was also tutoring, which gave me a lot of the like soft skills that I needed to be able to continue to navigate the workplace. And then from there, I was actually tutoring like 3-year-olds how to play chess, which was like a really weird job. But I would go to these people's homes and I would tell these stories about how, like the king would move around the board. He's like a really hungry king, and he wants to like eat all this food, and then he moves one step at a time. And there's this other king who's like really scared, and he moves one step at a time. So these stories helped as well. It built a different design skill, storytelling, more on that later probably. But from there, I got a job at Nickelodeon where I was working on interactive video, and that was really like the foray into digital design. And from there, I went to General Assembly. So I did their bootcamp program, bounced around between different jobs at an agency, at Kaplan, which is an education company, at Food Network, at Vimeo, which is a video company, and now finally, as of this week, Amazon.
Wow. Okay, that was amazing.
There's a lot in there.
We like went super quickly, so I'm really excited to kind of dive deeper into all of that. So you have a lot of really big names that you worked with, which is super, super interesting. And I definitely want to know like what it was that, well, actually, I'll just maybe talk about it now. What was it about these big names? Like, how did you, I guess the first one that you talked about, and then I want to go backwards because I want to talk about some of that early stuff, but Nickelodeon was like that big first name. So what was that like? How did you make the jump from having your own company to working at Nickelodeon? And what did you do there?
Yeah. So it was a kind of a wild job. They hired me to do interactive video. So think like Blue's Clues, but instead of a TV, we have these touch devices. They became more and more popular at the time with children because they get the hand-me-downs. And the challenge was, how do you like make Blue's Clues an interactive thing instead of just like looking at the TV and shouting at it? So it was a call and response medium, which is very good for interactive. So I got that job. I applied on a whim. I think my background in games really helped there because they wanted to bring in games. Background in children's experiences because I was teaching and tutoring with children helped a lot, and I did a good design test. So
that's amazing. Yeah, and interactive games. What year was that you were?
Just 2016.
2016. Okay. Because I feel like interactive games and the metaverse and like everything they're doing now is just really taking off. So it sounds like you were kind of like in the early frontier of some of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you think like Netflix has all their interactive specials around video, Bandersnatch being maybe one of the more popular ones of those.
Yes.
Yeah. So got in a little bit before that.
Yeah, that's super awesome. So let's take a step back. I want to talk about what was it that convinced you to go from working in law, getting a finance degree, going from there to jumping into design. You basically, how you phrased it was like, oh, you wanted to get out of that. You realized that wasn't it. You really liked games. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So like even going into college, like I wanted to make games. Like that was something I really wanted to do. A very, a smaller subset of design, but still design. But I always thought to do that, you needed to be a programmer. You needed to like know like coding. And at the time, like maybe you did, maybe you didn't. And I just went through the rest of college saying like, okay, I can't do this. I don't really like this skill. I don't like to code. I still don't. And I gave up on that. But then a friend of mine years later, when I was making my transition, he said, I'm just going to make a game. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I'm just going to make it. I'm just going to make a board game. And I'm like, oh, all right, I guess I'll make one too. And this was the time when Kickstarter was getting very popular. So I used that to crowdfund income for the business. And it worked out.
What was the game?
The game's called Fun Employed. It's a game about applying to jobs. So you have to apply to jobs using like a bunch of different cards and like tell a story. So it's like an improv type of game where you have to like convince someone why you'd be good for a job. But what you have to convince them with is like things you'd never say in an actual interview. So it ends up being very satirical, sometimes a little dark, but usually just a fun time.
That's really cool. That's super cool. And you talked a lot about like usability testing there. So that was like maybe one of the first times you were doing more like maybe product design skill set. So user testing, what did that look like for a board game?
Yeah, so a lot of game design comes down to like finding the fun and what that's like. So that's bringing a lot of people into that process and seeing what they find fun. So that's what I did for my game. It was a party game. So I threw parties, and at those parties, I would have copies of the game and I'd watch people play them. And at the end of it, and I'd be watching throughout all of it. So maybe a little bit more like contextual inquiry, or like you're just like observing while someone's doing something, not necessarily like interrupting their flow as they're going through that. So it's not like a task that you'd give them to accomplish, but rather just like putting something in front of them and just like walking away and seeing, how they interact. And at the very end, I'd ask them to reflect on their experiences. So I'd ask like, what'd you find fun? What'd you find not fun? Sometimes I'd run surveys for the cards. The things that you would do in traditional digital product design just applied to a physical experience.
Yes, that's very interesting. And design thinking, you mentioned, which comes into play there. And I mean, I think design thinking, what I like about when you saying it in this context is like design thinking is used in so many different instances. Like, even though it has the word design in it, like there's so many different companies or so many different scenarios. And so you're using design thinking to build a game, which is very fascinating. And I think interesting for listeners that are maybe more on the founder side of things, like understanding that design thinking can really shift ways of thinking and making it more fun. And I don't know, maybe you can talk a little bit about design thinking and how you feel about design thinking.
Yeah, I think it's, being at the core of just thinking about like who you're making something for. So I feel that when I'm making my designs or my products or whatever I'm working on, it's like, I have my own desires and like what I want to see within that, but it's really for someone else to consume. So that's kind of what drove me for at least my game development, thinking about how someone else would use it and taking yourself out of that. There are things that I preferred to do with the game and play in the game, but other people used it completely differently. And designing for those people and keeping like other use cases in mind, I'd say is probably like the most important high level thing there.
Yes, that's great. And then before we switch gears and talk more about some of these other companies, how was it kind of starting your own company, founding your own company, raising a Kickstarter? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I had to wear a lot of hats. I mean, that's probably obvious, but the way that I structured it there was work that I knew I wanted to do and work I knew I didn't want to do. So I relied on strategic partnerships to facilitate that. Like, I don't like marketing. That's just not something I want to do. That's something that's very important to do. And finding the right partners to do that for me has really helped with that.
Yeah, I feel that. So as a founder of the design project, like, I think that there's many things that I am good at and there's many things I'm not good at. And I like to leverage other people and other teammates who are better. And I think that's like a great skill, even in the design world. Like, I think there's this product design, UI, UX. Some people are more geared towards UX, some are more geared towards UI, and combining forces and working together. That's where you get a great product. And so, like, knowing your strengths and knowing where you want to grow and knowing where you want to collaborate is super powerful.
Yeah, building a product's team sport, straight up. That's just what it is.
Team sport. I like how you said
company,
that. Yes.
All that. Yeah.
So. Team sport for sure. That's great. Okay. So from there, what was that point of you deciding, hey, I have built this game, love it. Now I'm ready to try something else and get a job. And
yeah. So for me, it was fun to build the game, and I built a couple others as well, but it wasn't sustainable enough for it to hit like the life goals that I wanted. So I knew I had to like explore other things. So I ended up structuring deals to publish those games with other publishers, and kind of let those things live their own lives while pursuing my career. So
those games, where can we find those games? Could we find them on like Amazon or?
It should. So the big one, Fun Employed, is still available on Amazon. There should be some copies floating out there still for some of its different print editions. We had several publishers. The other one is called Emergence Genesis, and that one's a lot harder to find, though. If any listeners are curious, you could contact me. I have a case of like 50 of them over there or something like that. But that one's a lot harder. Much maybe a little bit crunchier of an experience for someone who really likes board games.
Okay, so like the big board game lovers.
More strategic stuff going in there than like a party game that might be similar to like Apples to Apples or something like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
So when you sold this, how did you structure that? Are you getting like a royalty fee or?
Without going too deep into it, general board game deals are like a royalty basis, or like you sell an idea as an inventor. So if you're an inventor, you could go to a company and say, hey, do you want to buy this idea? You have complete rights to it. You can do whatever you want with it. You pay like a lump sum or some percentage thereof of sales after the fact. Or if you can like license a board game or an idea to a company, and then you get royalties from that. So
okay.
In perpetuity.
I think what's really great about that, and I think as a designer, sometimes like design takes over our lives. And some of the conversations I've had with other designers on this podcast is like that work-life balance and doing art, creative something for yourself. And so that kind of reminded me of, like you love board games. You were like, I'm going to create a board game. And you also were making revenue off of it, or you still are, a percentage or something small. So it's like you can turn hobbies into different revenue streams, or also just doing something that is really fun that's maybe outside of your typical 9-to-5 design job.
I think being driven by your own curiosity and like exploring different things is like really good and healthy and fun and fulfilling if you have the ability to do that. And you should, I like to think that I have like career tapas, like I love tapas, and it's just like you get a little bit of everything. And I kind of have that in my career. So
career tapas. There's a lot of good little nuggets in here. So have you created any games since, or is that like a passion project? Do you plan on continuing board games?
I'm dabbling. I've made some other, those two are the big ones. I've made some other ones. My current efforts are much more centric in product design. So I'm working a lot more on, my career at Amazon now, some teaching that I do on the side. I do a lot of mentoring. I'm writing a book. So I have like a lot of other stuff that is on my plate currently, in addition to just life stuff. So no games currently in development, though, thinking of a couple ideas.
Okay, got it. Well, I'm curious to hear about those and checking out some of those that are out there. Okay, so you got a job at Nickelodeon. We talked a little bit about that. Interactive video, super interesting, kind of at the forefront. And then you kind of bounced around to a couple of other companies. So what was that journey like? I wrote like General Assembly. I think there were some others, Food Network, Vimeo. And I guess also like, where did you start to get into more of that product design space in those jobs?
Totally. Yeah. So still in the Nickelodeon era, we're getting into UX. We understand a lot more about it. We're getting into digital. But I'm not necessarily working in Figma or Sketch or, InVision or any of the tools that you would use to do in the trenches design work. This is much more akin to maybe a digital creative rather than like being in the tool specifically. So once my time at Nickelodeon ended, it was contract work. When that was over, I was like, what am I doing next? Like, where am I going? And I had no idea. And I had all these different skill sets, all these different ideas. Maybe I was a producer, maybe I was a program manager, maybe I was a product manager. I don't know. So I went to General Assembly to help understand that for myself. And I fell in love with user experience proper and just did that program. And over the course of those, I think it was 12 weeks, maybe 16, I forget the exact amount, but a long amount of studying intensively every day, like 9 to 9, sometimes 9 to 12. It gave me those skill sets that I would need to try to get a job, not just the hard skills, but the soft skills as well. A lot of work with like my career coach, for example. So that led me to my first job in the industry, proper, if we're talking about like being inside the tool, which was at an agency. That was a short-lived 3 months. And then I made myself to Kaplan. And then from there, the rest. So
their product design, UI UX design is very trendy right now. There are a ton of boot camps out there. I've interviewed so many designers that came out of boot camps, and I would love to hear more of your experience. It sounds like you had a great experience. It sounds like it really like helped you understand what you wanted to do. What would you say to some of those designers that are thinking about boot camp, currently in boot camp, about to graduate boot camp? Like, how can they get to that next level and get that first job?
Yeah. So if you're thinking about a boot camp, you should do it. I mean, everyone's situation is different, but it's like, I will say it's changed my life and it's amazing. Great career. You should switch if you're thinking about it. If you're in or graduating, what I've noticed in the market, and it's unfortunate, is that and this is true for a lot of jobs, but it feels very true for this field, is that you need to have experience to get experience. So what I mean by that is like, entry level jobs require 2 years of experience. It's really annoying, especially as a bootcamp grad. And I went through that as well. I think I applied to over 300 jobs in a 3-month span, and I traveled Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, thought about some remote ones as well. I was all over Baltimore to try to find my first job. This was before remote was like really popular. It was there, but not nearly as much, especially for a discipline that's so like collaborative in person. But yeah, so my approach was go wide and find something, because I knew that once I was in, I was in. And when I was in, I could navigate a field a lot more fluidly. I'd understand it more. I'd have like the ability to tell stories that helped me move further and faster. And I think I've accelerated my career quite a bit once I got in. So I just need to like get past that wall. So my strategy was buy as many lottery tickets as I could to get past that wall by applying to as many jobs as I could, talking to as many people as I could, going to many events as I could. It was a real, there's some real burnout during that time, and it was really hard. So what I will say is if you're going through it now, or you're about to go through it, it's hard. But if you stick with it, and I've seen people fall off it, and I've seen people stay through it, and the people who stayed through it, their lives are different. They're just better. They by their standards, not by a standard that I'm imposing on them, they say it's better. So
yeah, I think that's super wise. I mean, I really like what you said. It's like, you just need an in, like in my experience now, when I'm talking to some of these junior designers, and maybe this is different from you, but I feel like when they go into boot camp, they're like, okay, you are sought after. You're going to get a $90,000 job straight out of boot camp. You're going to make it. And I think that a lot of them have these assumptions that aren't real, and like, it does take work, and you do have to have that experience. You do just need to get something. You need to get in. You need to not be too picky, and you need to like you said, like lottery, like just get in and then you can shape. And I think that's really, really great advice for people going through boot camps, graduating boot camps. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think that's right. And I think one thing I will say about boot camps specifically is that, university students go through this too. They need their first job just like anyone else. And they have the portfolio and the training, sure. But you get that through the boot camp as well. And one thing that I've found for people who are later stage or transitioning, you've had a couple of years under your belt at some job, is that you accumulate all these other skills that you don't even think are skills. Like you just get all of these abilities to like write an email and have a conversation and be present and navigate these situations that once you're in, you can accelerate your career significantly. So the people that I've seen really move a lot further once they make it into the industry are those ones who are maybe in their 30s, or maybe who have a lot of these like extra skills that they discount or don't think matter. And they matter quite a lot. So if you feel like you're like late to the game, don't necessarily feel that way.
Yes, I love that. And you talked about soft skills too. You said that was something that you learned at boot camp, but I do think those soft skills and those skills that you learn early on or in your first career, like I think, so my degree was in graphic design. I graduated and got a job in traditional graphic design before product design was a thing. And I remember my first job and I was like, what? I feel like I was so unprepared from school I went to. I was like, I do not know how to be in a business setting. Like it totally like threw me around, but it's like being patient and realizing that you don't know and learning. And so I really like how you said that.
Yeah, like one of the best designers in my program, she's like a bartender, but as a bartender, you talk to people a lot. Turns out as a designer, you design for people a lot. As a result, you can do a lot of good work there because you have a good understanding of how to have a conversation with someone. So
yes, so important. Because design is not just the hard skills working in Figma. There's so many other things you need to be doing and collaborating with, for sure. So you got your first job and then you kind of worked your way up. Talk a little bit about what that looked like for you.
Yeah, so my first job was very hard. I was not at all aware of what I was doing. Learning the visual skills was my biggest challenge. I'd come from like a writing background at the law firm, for example. So I felt that I was able to do those types of things, explain arguments, analyze problems, but like knowing like the patterns of like, when do you use this type of button? What is this type of icon called? I have no idea, and trying to navigate those tools. So that was a huge challenge for me. And I did not think I was able to do it to the extent that I thought maybe I want to be a product manager, maybe I want to be a UX researcher. So the first job was rough. The second job was interesting in that I was like a documentation like expert when I got hired. So it was like I was in the design department, but I was doing documentation for design. So maybe like you think it's like a program manager or something like that. But after a couple of weeks, a coworker left and an opening for doing more design work opened up. And I was like, okay, let me do that. And my manager was like, sure, I don't need to hire anyone. This is perfect. So we had a design system. I was very on Rails. So I learned a lot of how to like navigate the tool and navigate these conversations with developers and other designers and product managers. So the transition happened like pretty organically once I got into an organization, doing something adjacent to design in that organization. And fortunately, like they kept growing me through that way until I made it to my next role. So I would say like the first one was like junior/entry level. The second one was like mid-level. And then by the time I made it to Food Network, I got to senior level.
Would you say that kind of jumping jobs was a great way to continue to make that jump? Or do you think that it would have happened if you had stayed at the same job?
Oh, it would not have happened if I stayed at those jobs.
Okay.
But that's more of like an individual departmental problem rather than, the idea of staying at a job. I'm torn on this. So on the one hand, getting a new job is a great way to increase your salary and your position. On the other hand, should you really be jumping around so much? I've jumped 5 times since, I guess 4 times technically. I've had 5 different jobs since I graduated General Assembly 4 years ago, almost to the day, actually.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. So should you do that? It's up to you. Like I didn't really search out those jobs. Like after the second one, they kind of found me. So I made the change because they offered something better.
Right.
Should you do that? It's up to you and your own mileage. I think I'll offer an industry statistic, two industry statistics. So the first one is, and this is as of 2021, the average tech employee stays in their job. How what do you think the average is?
Ooh, good question.
Because I know, but who cares? 2 years? Okay. 15 months.
15 months.
Yeah.
That's average.
That is the average amount someone spends at a tech company. And like maybe we're pulling in all disciplines here. So is the sales, is it, engineering, how much is that? Okay. So we'll go to 2019. This is a number from Envision. What do you think the average is for a designer?
It's less for sure. I would say like 9 months.
It's a year. Yeah.
It's a year. Okay.
Yeah. So should you change jobs often? Well, the industry average is a year.
Yes. That's a great
so I don't think you have to. I think I've seen a lot of people advance quite quickly at certain organizations, but it's also up to you and your career. So know that there's because of these trends, there's a lot of fluidity in the market. I'd say it's like the 3 to 6 month mark before recruiters start reaching out for someone who just joined.
So what would you say to a designer that is looking to kind of up their career and continuing to make that growth? Like, what do you think is that ideal stage where they feel like they're ready from junior to mid? Like, what does that look like? How does the designer know, like, okay, I'm ready to be a mid-level designer? Or what does it look like from mid to senior?
Yeah. So from junior to mid, you're probably pretty comfortable, at least in the tool and with your team. So I'd say if you're a junior, you're like, oh my God, what's happening? And then as a mid-level, you're probably like, okay, yeah, this is what's happening and I can handle that. And I think you can solve the problems in your individual space. I've heard that as people get more senior, one term I like to use is a force multiplier. So what I mean by that is at the junior and mid-level, you start solving your own problems and your team's problems. As you go up, you start to extend your sphere of influence so that you're now able to help other people solve their problems in other verticals. So let's say you're working on a music service and you've got two types of content, like songs and podcasts. If you're a designer for songs, you're a junior mid-level, maybe you're fully owning that stuff. As a junior, you're learning how to, and a mid-level, you own it. And when you get to a senior, you're owning that and then also helping out on the podcast side. So now you're able to help those designers and those teams, and you start operating at scale. So that's when I think, and that's the mentoring, that's setting up libraries so that other people can use them. That's coming up with design principles that apply to other situations outside of yourself, or documentation or processes. That's how I've seen senior and lead level or principal level talent grow.
Yeah, that's a great way of breaking it down. I think it's a great way of breaking it down, especially in more of a corporate setting, is when you reach that point where you feel comfortable for mid, and when you feel ready to kind of document and mentor as a senior and take on more responsibilities and just feel like you're capable of doing that. I think that's a great way of phrasing it. And I think that is really helpful for people that are like, am I ready? Or what does that look like? Should I apply to the senior level job if I'm a mid-level right now?
Yeah, you should always apply. For applying to things, if you apply to a job you're 100% qualified for, then where's your growth in that job? You're just going to leave, or there's no way for you to improve yourself. You should apply to a job if you think you're 0% qualified. It's up to them to determine if you're qualified.
Right.
That's the process. So if you don't feel like you're ready, you should still apply. And to do a pulse check, if you are am I mid? I don't know if I am or not. You should ask the people who know you, your coworkers, but also your family, your friends, and just say where would you put me? Or how do you see, or where do you see I can grow? It's a great way to get a pulse outside of yourself.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I want to talk about mentorship. I know
Sure.
That is something that you've done quite a bit, and you feel passionate about. Tell us a little bit about how you got into mentorship.
Yeah, totally. So it started with honestly probably the teaching and tutoring. So I'd been a teacher and tutor for years before doing design, SAT, ACT, chess. So a lot of that came pretty naturally for me. But for design specifically, I saw an opportunity years ago with the Interaction Design Foundation. They were saying, hey, do you want to be a mentor? And mentorship wasn't as prevalent. This was pre-COVID. So I said yes, and I started mentoring someone. And then COVID hit, a service became really popular out of that called ADP. So ADP list, I think it stands for Awesome Design People. Thousands of mentors on this service, and if you're listening, you should check them out. And the IDF too. These are good resources.
Yeah.
But I mentioned ADP list because it's very self-serve. So you can find people from Spotify, Amazon, Google, Facebook, wherever, and talk to them. You can talk to hiring managers. You can talk to people who are in the same spot as you or who just left that spot. It's all volunteer based, and I would recommend checking out that list. So I mentored there a lot. I joined Design Lab to mentor with them, which is a boot camp. Mentored GA for a little bit. So a lot of different places where on a volunteer basis, people are, willing to offer their time and help. So I think it's like my version of giving back. I know the struggle is really hard to get to the industry and to navigate it once you're there. So yeah, I think that's what kind of drove me into it.
Yeah. I mean, you have that experience, you can relate. So I think that's a great way to mentor. What does mentorship look like in these programs? Is it like from a design standpoint, are you giving like hard skill advice? Are you like helping them find that job, helping them understand how to do interviews?
Yeah, it's a blend. So sometimes people will be like, hey, look at my portfolio. So very straightforward, like, is this good? Is it not good? And why? Sometimes it'll be like navigational of like, hey, how do I get a job? Sometimes I'll look at resumes. So like, very tactical, straightforward stuff. Sometimes it's like, I'm working on a specific design problem. Can you help me? That happens a lot more with the continued engagements. So ADP list, for the most part, has like a lot of like one-offs, but sometimes you can find someone you like staying with. Design Lab is you stay with someone for months. You're their coach going through the bootcamp experience, which is great to have like that type of coach. So for those experiences, we get to all sorts of different topics, the homework, but also like the career, how to navigate that, how to go on an interview, all sorts.
Very cool. How important do you think it is to have mentorship, especially as a junior designer?
It's kind of like a cheat code, really.
Yeah.
You have, and that's just good for anything in life. You have this person who has years of experience trying to figure it out themselves, and you get to ask them, well, how do you do this specific thing? And they have the answer, and then you have the answer, and you get to learn from that. So it shortcuts a lot of the work. So you should do that.
Yeah.
It's good to have.
I agree. Do you have a mentor? Is there someone that you talk to regularly?
I don't have like a specific one. I have like a bunch of different people I ask advice for that are very like specialized in certain aspects. So I actually still talk to my career coach from General Assembly, for example. Great. So yeah, I have his name's Brian. We have a very good relationship, and we help each other a lot, which is awesome. So yeah, all sorts of different people that like specialize in certain areas. I wouldn't say like any of them are called mentor to me, but yeah. It's
like someone you can go to, reach out to for advice that you feel comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
In a similar boat.
And it's like, and it's in the same way and in different ways. So
yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Okay, so we've kind of gone through, you had these 3 jobs, you've moved up to senior designer, and I think that kind of brings us to about where you are today. So what was this process like to get your current new job? Congratulations again.
Thank you.
What did that look like for you?
Oh man, I have a special history with Amazon. So I was in the process of trying to get a job at Amazon since 2019. Over the years, various times, different departments have reached out, and we finally, found an opportunity that made the most sense for both of us. And they have a very thorough process that at a high level involves like a one-on-one conversation with a recruiter, then a hiring manager to go through your work. And then you end up with like doing a bunch of cross-functional interviews where a bunch of people ask you questions, and it's without saying too much, it's like those STAR type of questions, if you're familiar with that acronym, which is situation, task, action, result, where you like go through an experience and talk about the situation and then the task you had to do, the action you took, and the result that came out of that. So, and a portfolio presentation is very common as well. So, yeah.
Okay, well, that's awesome. So what's the position? It's senior designer?
Yep. So as a senior product designer on Amazon Music, I don't know how much I can say,
Okay.
but what I can say is Amazon Music is constantly evolving and adding new features in order to, enhance its product offering and make a really good immersive experience for people listening to audio, whether that be music or podcast.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I think it's really interesting, like the investment in podcasts. I know you talked about it a couple of times, but like music, yes, we've all had Amazon Music, Spotify, all these platforms, and then this like new edition of podcasts and how much it's elevating. Some of this is super, super fascinating. So I think that'll be interesting to kind of watch how it evolves.
Yeah, I'm curious too.
Yes, perfect. So what's next for you, Anthony? Like, where do you see your career going in the next 2 years, 5 years? Where do you want to be? What's like your ultimate goal?
Yeah, I think the next like 12 to 24 months, definitely integrate into Amazon. Maybe do some of the extra side hustles that I'm talking about. Like keeping up with the mentoring, keeping up with the teaching. I teach for a boot camp in Armenia. I'm doing the design lab work. Yeah, I can talk about that one too. It's a really interesting boot camp.
Yeah, please do. Let's hear about it now. I'm very.
All right, we'll talk about it now, and we'll get back to the long road stuff. So earlier this year, a boot camp called Build Up Bootcamp launched, and it is for Armenian tech professionals. This is across design, across engineering, across product management, sales, other disciplines as well. And what they do is they take 6 professionals, and I think they're upping it to 9 for the next cohort. They just finished the first cohort. They take 6 people who have some familiarity in these disciplines, and one of each, and they put them together on a team. And that team, over the course of 4 months, with various mentors and subject matter experts, they build a product, and then they launch it on Product Hunt. And they just launched several products. One of them hit product of the day, one of them hit number 2, and one of them hit number 6. And these are like real functioning products that some of the teams will continue to build after the fact. So it's like a very unique boot camp because you actually build a product during it, but it requires like a little bit of like experience beforehand. So it actually like dovetails nicely from like someone took a boot camp and then they went to that.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's super interesting. I want to do more research on that because I think that's like I think once you have those skills and you learn how like about design and you have a little bit, actually building something is really like that real world experience. So that's like very, very interesting.
It's called Build Up Bootcamp. They just launched the second cohort, Armenian only for now. But I think it's like really interesting to have these like incubators where it's like, okay, you just finished a boot camp, you have like experience, but you need to like actually get a bit more experience, practical experience doing the work day to day. For like a real client or something like that. So it's I think it's like a really interesting way to take the industry, and I wonder how many services will do it. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Very interesting. Okay. That was a side tangent, but going back to like where you see yourself. So you're going to continue to do your side projects. You want to continue to kind of mentor and be a part of these boot camps for the next 12 to 24 months. Yeah, and probably for the foreseeable horizon. I hope in the next year to write and finish my book. So I'm writing a book for it's like a roadmap for designers. So like the primary audience is like, hey, how do I do design? What is this thing? Both at like the student level, but also as an educator, how do you teach design? So there's like a dual audience there with a lot of exercises in this book. And then the secondary audience being like maybe a product manager who wants to learn design, or anyone really who wants to like weave in design thinking into their processes. So. Yeah, that's awesome. And, like, I think there are so many creatives, so many designers that are so interested in learning that and need those people. And you talked about writing as something kind of like your backgrounds where you come from. So I think it's like combining some of the history and like where you started and like being able to implement that and move it into product design and help teach people. Yeah, it's weird how all the tapas have blended together into like a smoothie now, but it's still delicious. So, it's good. That's super exciting. Well, I'm very excited for this book. Do you have like a date you're looking to end, or is it kind of like a side project that? Yeah, so I think we're targeting like a launch of like September next year. So this is like a year out. So like we still have a lot of time. I mean, it needs to be written. So hoping to launch that sometime next year. Well, that is awesome. Definitely keep us updated on that, all of those details. Sure. But so Thank you so much for joining me and telling us your story. I think there's so many amazing nuggets that we got out of this conversation, and just learning how you've navigated like boot camp and where you are today and where you're going, and tutoring chess to making board games to mentoring. So it was really, really fascinating. So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, we'll be in touch to keep up with all of these things happening.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Of course.